All right, so first off, let's take a look at some of the economic forces that unite and divide the European Union. All right, so first off, that idea that a common market. So if you remember, that's back what Robert Schuman first idealized in 1952 for Europe to kind of keep it from declaring war on itself, is this common market. So a common market is a very important economic force that will unite the EU. So under a common market, goods, so items, move freely across national borders. So what that means is free trade, no taxes, no tariffs. And what that eventually is going to lead to is people are going to have more choices on what they can buy and what they want to buy. As we've learned from economics in the past, more choices is going to lead to more competition amongst the producers of various products. And more competition is always good for consumers because it's going to lower the prices of products. So, workers are also able to, in a common market, workers are able to travel freely to other EU countries to find work. So you can live in Spain, but say work in France. So it gives you more economic opportunity to find a job. The other economic force that is going to help unite the EU is the use of a common currency. So most countries in Europe have a common currency known as the euro. The euro makes it very easy to travel and trade across the EU. If you've ever traveled outside of the United States, you will know that you have to change money. So not everyone uses the US dollar. So it's just kind of a hassle. It's an extra step when you go to trade and do business or purchase things in another country. So to get rid of that and make things a little easier, the European Union created the common currency of the euro. So therefore, you don't have to exchange your currency when crossing borders, and it just allows for easier trade. The other economic force that unites the EU is this idea of a trade bloc. So what this is the economies of Europe bring their forces and bring their economic power together. And what that does is it will give together each country more influence than they would have on their own. So here's what kind of that looks like. So this data is from 2016. It's a little bit old, but you can see going across the x-axis at the bottom, this is like a GDP is your gross domestic product in your country, how much trading power you have and its worth. And this is in trillions of US dollars. So you can see India has close to 3 trillion GDP economic power. Japan has close to 5 trillion. The United States has 18.5 trillion. China has 11 trillion. And if you look at the European Union bar there, and you can see segmented and independently on their own, Germany would just have over maybe 3.5 trillion GDP dollars of power. United Kingdom only has maybe 2.5 trillion dollars or GDP and dollars of power. But once you see all these countries unite themselves, and you can see the big ones, Germany definitely has the biggest GDP in all of the EU. But once they unite their powers together, they have more influence and they have more power globally. If Germany was just by itself, it really wouldn't compete that much. Okay, it would be slightly higher than India, but still lower than Japan. Italy and Spain, and especially some of the smaller EU countries, don't have a lot of power independently. But if they join forces with other EU economies, it makes them incredibly powerful. So this idea of a trade bloc is very, very good for big and small EU countries to get them more power in the global trade. So just like there are things that unite the EU, there are also forces that divide the EU. So these are things that have become problems. So the first biggest and probably the most prevalent problem with the European Union today economically is this idea of Eastern Europe versus Western Europe, or West versus East. So these two different parts of Europe disagree on a lot of different things. Okay, one of the big ones is how the EU spends its money. Western European countries tend to be wealthier than those in the central and eastern part of Europe. So I'm talking about countries like Spain and France and Germany and the UK. They're a little bit more established, a little bit more older, and they definitely have more wealth than some of the smaller Eastern and Central European countries. So the EU collects taxes, kind of like a government would, and they spend money across all European countries to do improvements. A lot of what the EU spends its money on goes towards some of the poor nations in the central and the eastern part of Europe. And this makes some of the Western nations upset because so much of their money that they're earning and giving to the EU is being spent outside their own zone. So that kind of creates some conflict with interests, as well as why is my money that I'm contributing not going towards my people? So that can cause some issues. The other thing that can cause some issues is with jobs, employment, and wages. So workers in Western Europe, because it's a little bit more wealthy and established, they are paid higher wages. They tend to be maybe a little bit more educated, and they tend to demand a little bit more higher wages than those compared to in Central and Eastern Europe. But the difference is the cost of living is also higher in these Western countries. So to live well in Spain and France, the United Kingdom, and Germany, it takes a lot of money. So these workers are needing higher wages. So what a lot of Western European companies have done is they have outsourced or moved a lot of their manufacturing jobs to some of the poor EU countries to save money on labor. So they can hire someone, say, in Estonia, a lot more cheaper than they can to hire someone in France to do a job. So by moving jobs to the different parts of Europe, Western European countries and employees are fearing that they could lose a lot of their jobs to some of the cheaper Eastern European workers. Another issue with this is workers in the poorer EU countries tend to move towards the richer ones in search of jobs. So someone may leave their home and they may leave their family behind in search of a better opportunity in, say, a wealthier Western European country. This has created kind of some resentment towards immigrants, especially immigrants in the Eastern descent in the Western European countries, because they fear that they're taking jobs and they're overall decreasing the value and the wages for everyone's job. So again, this just kind of adds to this East versus West economic dividing force. The other third and final dividing force for economics is, again, coming back to that common currency, the euro, excuse me. So the common currency we just talked about as being a positive force. It is a positive force, but it's also a negative force. Not everyone that's within the European Union uses the euro. In order to use the euro, you kind of have to earn it. Your economy has to be established. You have to prove that you're going to contribute to the value of the euro before they let you use it. There are also some countries that when they originally joined, like the United Kingdom, for example, they did not want to give up their own currency, the pound, so they were allowed to keep it. And that then creates a hassle. If you do travel to London, you're still within, or Europe, if you travel to the United Kingdom, you're still in the EU zone, but you have to exchange your money. So it just kind of creates some rifts and some issues. The other problem with a common currency is because it is a common currency, if one country's economy starts suffering, it's going to bring the value of the euro to drop for everyone, even if it's something that you don't contribute to. So, for example, a few years back, Greece was struggling financially. Their economy was really, really low and down, and it actually dropped the value of the euro down for everybody. So, even somewhere in, say, France, the value of the euro decreased, even though something was happening far away from them. So, when you share a currency, you also share the downfalls across the board. So, there are your uniting and dividing forces economically for the EU. Feel free to go back and review the video and make sure you document your answers on your notes and get them checked by me. Thank you.